Good afternoon and welcome to UK Column News. Today is Monday, the 7th of April, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, and delighted to have with me in the studio Ben Rubin, and we've got Diane, Rasmussen, McAdie joining us by live video link. What a day, and viewers today get a glimpse of a wonderful outlook on Plymouth Sound with blue sea, blue sky, and a lot of sunshine. So really lovely backdrop today, which we're delighted to have. Now, we're going to get started right away with a subject we've talked about before, which is the rapidly approaching state crackdown on free speech. And this is something that if we don't tackle this properly, then UK column itself is under grave threat, because there is no doubt the agenda is for the British state to control all press and media. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, everyone. And we're going to pick up on a theme that we were exploring last week, and actually not just last week, we talk about this all the time, and it is the audacious takeover of the national, regional and local news through philanthropic funding, government intervention, and an overbearing and increasingly censorious media regulator. Last week, we were looking at this report from Demos, Epistemic Security 2029, Fortifying the UK's Information Supply Chain to Tackle the Democratic Emergency. Too long, didn't read it. Basically, they want more powers to censor you. The Online Safety Act is not enough, and they want more powers, and we're going to explore that with specific reference to something that they call news deserts, interestingly, which is a term that emerged in this report. We're going to look at where that's come from. So if we go back to that and jump to page 30, which is about boosting our domestic information supply chain, specifically section 4B. I know you all went and downloaded this, so if you've got it in front of you, you can go and read it. So 4B provides targeted funding to stimulate a new era of vibrant local news in what they call news deserts. That's what this is about. And the recommendation is for central government to provide a funding package blended with other sources of funding, e.g. from philanthropists and big tech funds, to help stimulate a new era of vibrant local news starting at £50 million a year and focusing on what they describe as news deserts, right? So we've got these news deserts all around the UK, and in order to fill them, to bring them back to life, philanthropists, the government and big tech have got to come together and inject a load of money into this. I wonder if any of that will be coming in our direction. I'm not sure. It comes from this organisation. This is based on some work done by Public Interest News Foundation, who work very closely with Demos. They're referenced 3 times in the report, and we're going to look at them and what they're all about. So this is their website. They've been around for 5 years. And obviously, they're a non-profit, non-partisan, purely altruistic organisation focused on the public interest. And what does public interest news mean? I think it's important for us to define this, given it's what we're talking about here. Going to read this whole thing out, actually. Maybe we'll dwell on each of these points. So public interest news is news and other information which is produced and disseminated to the public according to high standards of ethical conduct and best practice in journalism, and which provides one or more of the following benefits to the public. First one, informs members of the public about matters of relevance to their role and responsibilities as citizens. Yeah? So this is what you've got to do, citizen. Yeah. Second point, enables members of local communities to become aware of and understand matters of common concern to them as members of their community, and which promotes their involvement and cooperation in such matters and community cohesion accordingly. Yeah, so you've got to know what you've got to do, and you've got to be cooperative with it.
And you've got to do it, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So this is direct control of communities and individuals by the government.
Absolutely. Right. Third point, enables members of the public to participate in an informed manner in relevant democratic processes. So I'm thinking maybe citizens' assemblies are lurking behind this, and as a result, supports the legitimacy of the democratic process as a whole. That's an important one there. Fourth point, benefits the public by promoting charitable educational outcomes, such as improving public understanding of health and medical matters, like pandemics, I guess.
So this is you're going to be told what you need to believe. And if you don't believe the official narrative, you're going to be in trouble.
Absolutely. Or the conservation of the environment. So that's the climate agenda. Pandemics and climate in that fourth point. Final point, specifically excludes material which is simply entertaining in nature, like UK column, we just entertainment, or politically motivated, biased or inaccurate, so no disinformation, or which fails to observe a person's right to privacy, right? So those things aren't public interest news. And apparently, according to Public Interest News Foundation, there are deserts all around the country of public interest news. And they've built this quite impressive interactive map you can go and look at. And they've collated across the whole country where they see deserts, spaces where there is no reliable information for communities to access. And one of those, actually, interesting, I'm going to have a little look at Plymouth. I thought we should look at PL1, see what's going on PL1. And bear in mind, they've looked at all media. Yeah, this is an extraordinarily in-depth study, right? So we've got 2-3 media organisations in Plymouth, Plymouth Chronicle, Plymouth Herald, funded by UK government. Yeah, look at the bottom left. This is funded by the UK government. But what's happening in Plympton? There's nothing happening in Plympton.
It's quite amazing.
But we're seeing in Plympton now, Brian. Why are we not on the map?
Because we're not giving the right news.
No, it's because we're simply entertainment purposes, aren't we? We're not serious, right? So apparently, no UK column. There's no UK column on your interactive map public interest news. The government clearly didn't pay you enough money. So anyway, what else are they up to other than looking at news deserts? Well, importantly, how to fill them. And they were commissioned by this other organisation, the Local News Commission, which is actually just the same people. Basically, they always do this. They set up a new independent thing, but it's all the same people in the background. But this Local News Commission popped up towards the end of last year, drawing on deep expertise from UK civil society, politics, trade unions and business to shape media policy. They commissioned this report, and within it, they look at the current state of media. Right. So this is the media ecosystem they've mapped out. Go download the report, by the way. We will always provide links to these things. You should go and read them yourself. And this is what they call democracy in danger. Right. And you can see the key, the different coloured arrows represent unhealthy for red, weak for yellow, or healthy for green. And if they're thicker, that means higher engagement. So you can see that the BBC has got a healthy but low engagement relationship with fragile communities at the top. Communities are fragile at the moment because the BBC is talking to them. You've got a fragile local news in the centre there, which the BBC is also talking to as well. So there's just a one-way relationship between the BBC, because the local news obviously look at what the BBC is saying and then they report that. And then central government's got a bit of a role to play. Local councils have got a weak and one-way relationship with local news, but the big red flag is the top left there. Yes, big tech, the big bad dangerous internet, and Elon Musk and Andrew Tate and where dragons are, out online, and that's causing fragile communities, and ultimately it's causing democracy to wither. If you see there in the top right hand corner, democracy is withering. Right, and we've got to fix this. How are we going to fix it? We're going to move to this model. This is 2035. This is democracy regenerated, where the BBC has a much stronger and more collaborative relationship with local news media through the local democracy reporting scheme, which is already in place. They want to bump that up. Central government has a more engaged role with local news media. Something called the Civic Centre. I don't know if you clocked that, but they've actually changed from a town hall to a civic centre. So the local council is going to be a new form of local council in this model by 2025. And the local council is going to have a much more direct relationship with these empowered communities at the top. So will the community newsroom. There's a new entrant, philanthropy. Yeah. Centre left. There's going to be a lot of money and a lot of influence coming into this ecosystem from philanthropy, rich people, right? This is money and power colluding with each other in order to take control of the media ecosystem, in order to, as they see it, empower communities so that democracy might flourish, right? What could possibly go wrong? And the big tech ecosystem has been tamed, yeah? We can see that it's now been regulated and restrained and is much more trustworthy, ultimately.
My comment on this, Ben, is, of course, the moment you let local councils loose with news, all that's simply going to come out is more of the mainstream political propaganda, because, of course, local councils are now highly politicised. They only follow the lead from the controlling party. So if it's a Labour council, it's going to be Labour propaganda. And if it's a Conservative council, it's going to be Conservative propaganda. So this is immensely dangerous. I can imagine that a Second World War Germany would have been desperate to be able to buy and facilitate this type of system in order to get propaganda to the individual 24 hours a day. This is really serious stuff, and people need to understand, if this architecture comes into place, free speech in this country absolutely gone.
Completely. And guess who funded this report? So who funds Public Interest News Foundation? Just be absolutely on the button about this. So Ben Goldsmith, Jimmy Goldsmith's son. So he's in the philanthropy bucket. DCMS, so like the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, have funded this report, this organisation. The European Media and Information Fund, Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust, Luminate, which is Daniel Sachs Foundation, they've got money in there, Open Societies, Paul Hamlin, all the usual suspects, basically. The NHS, because obviously we need to pay attention to public health information. That was in the definition of public interest media, wasn't it? Right. So that's who's pushing this. Yeah. So government and philanthropy want more involvement in media, so they funded a report to make that exact recommendation. It's a bit circular, isn't it? Who's behind Public Interest News Foundation? Some of the individuals. So we got Julius Weinberg. He's the chair, former chair of Ofsted, interestingly. For a number of years. Polly Curtis from Demos. She's the deputy chair of this organisation. So Demos uses Public Interest News Foundation as an external source of recommendations to put into its report, but actually the person who runs Demos is on the board of the Public Interest News Foundation. It's all a bit incestuous, isn't it? Who else? Richard Scorer. This is a fascinating one, right? So he's a solicitor, and he ran the independent inquiries, public inquiries into child sexual abuse, the Manchester Arena bombing, the COVID-19 inquiry, the Thirlwall inquiry, which is Lucy Letby, and the inquiry into the death of Dawn Sturgis, which is the Novichok issue. So that man there, Scorer, is basically one of the primary representatives of establishment narrative around some of the most controversial issues that have happened in the past 20 years. And he's on the trustee board of this organisation wanting to control local news media. Isn't that a bit odd?
Not if your agenda is total control, state control of all media and press.
Yeah,
Ben.
Quite. Okay, so these are the trustees. So these are non-execs, essentially. Let's have a look at a few of the exec team. Again, go and look at the website yourself. First one, Jonathan Hayward. He is the executive director, former editor of the Fabian Review. Yeah, that's his big claim to fame. So Fabian's right in the mix. He's also a leadership fellow at St George's House in Windsor, so nestled up right next to the royal family. Jaldeep Katwala, he's a network manager, former BBC, Channel 4, UN, you get the picture. And then the guy on the end there is a fascinating one, Samir Padania. So he's involved with Open Society Foundations, the Wellcome Trust, with Nesta, and also the International Fund for Public Interest Media that I spoke about a month ago, I think it was, where Mark Thompson is on the board, right? So this is a local news, but he's linked right up into the stratosphere in the global ecosystem around this. And he's also a trustee of something called the Indigo Trust. And if you remember this bloke, William Perrin OBE, last week, the guy that helped found found Ofcom, worked for Blair, has got a thing called the Indigo Trust that he's actually a founder of. That guy, Padania, is a trustee of that trust. So this is all just interconnected. It's just all the same. It's just one thing. Yeah. and it gets presented as many things. Extraordinarily corrupt, and dishonest. It's they're lying to us, frankly, about their intentions and their methods here.
How the system works, but it's a revolving door. And you've got one more here, I think, Ben.
Yep, I do indeed. Just very quickly, just to look at how this is actually coming to life in practice. So this is a case study from the Public Interest News Foundation website about ipswich.co.uk, and I'll just pull out 2 quotes from the article. Ipswich doesn't need more journalism, it needs change. And also, 22 organisations fund our journalism through an annual fee. We call this a common purpose levy. I think it says quite a bit.
That's just got to be a coincidence, I think, Ben. Well, let's move across to the so-called mainstream, or better known as the legacy media. And of course, for many people, through their letterbox dropped to Sunday Mail yesterday. Let's have a look at the front page. It says that Labour's Dan Norris suspended by party chiefs after police swoop on his West Country constituency home. Starmer rocked as MP held in rape and child abuse probe. Now, the thing is that front page goes to Labour's Dan Norris, but nothing about Dolphin Square child abuse, which I understand is stalled at the moment in the Daily Mail editorial queue. But thankfully, smaller outlets that do exist have been doing some good work in the background. And although we have known about this for a while, it's only been now that it was appropriate for us to point you to your local Guardian. And there is an address there on the on-screen image, so you can find it, where the headline was, "What do we know for sure about the Elm guest house scandal?" Now, this was a guest house where men were going not only for homosexual sex, but children were involved. And in the mix, a lot of people involved with the police and indeed the security services. But this local reporter, Charles Thompson, has produced an absolute fantastic article, and I'm going to encourage people to go and see it. But it includes some excerpts from documents. Here's the Met Police total policing, and it's talking about the way people were behaving in this particular accommodation. They were watching homosexual pornographic videos, and it gets very mucky indeed in some of these. So I'm not going to go into huge detail in today's news, except to say go and read the detail, because this is about the sexual abuse of principally young boys. But my point is that whilst the Mail on Sunday is printing a front page about Dan Norris MP, the role of the state and the Metropolitan Police, and indeed an MI5 agent in respect of Elm Guesthouse and the subsequent cover-up, that goes unreported. Now, there was a second report by this same man, Charles Thompson. He says that the IOPC won't publish the Elm Guesthouse police officer statements. So it's well known now that there are a lot of statements by police that have not been brought forward and put in front of the public. Why not? Because there's a very big cover-up by one of the police watchdogs. So if we have a look at some comment from the article, it says a police watchdog has refused to release documents about a paedophile ring investigation, despite publicly relying on them to dismiss serious corruption allegations, and that's corruption in the police. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has suppressed witness statements gathered in its reinvestigation of the notorious Elm Guesthouse, a Richmond brothel, that's a homosexual brothel, where a national inquiry ruled in 2020 that child sexual abuse took place. So if we have a look at this organisation, of course, they've got a glowing website about how good they are. We're the Independent Office for Police Conduct. We are the Police Complaints Watchdog for England and Wales. We're not the police. We are completely independent. Well, we'll see about that in a minute. We investigate the most serious complaints and conduct matters involving the police, and we set the standards by which the police should handle complaints. And of course, they like to say, as usual, that their vision is that everybody is able to have trust and confidence in the police. But it's very clear this organisation is helping the cover-up of key evidence, including key evidence from police officers demonstrating that children, especially very young boys, were raped and seriously sexually abused in Elm Guest House, but they don't want this coming to the surface. Let's just have a look at a little video clip of the IOPC bigging up itself and its role.
Following a series of scandals involving the Metropolitan Police and criticism of a perceived lack of independence in the existing complaints process, the Police Complaints Board was created by an Act of Parliament in June 1977. The 1981 Brixton riots and the Scarman report on allegations of racism in the police led to pressure to reform the Police Complaints Board. As part of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, the board was replaced by the Police Complaints Authority in April 1985. Following the murder of Stephen Lawrence in April 1993, public confidence in policing was again questioned. Sir William Macpherson's public inquiry into Stephen's murder called for the creation of a new, independent watchdog to oversee and investigate police complaints. In addition, a study in 2000 by Liberty, the human rights organisation, argued for an independent body to investigate police complaints. This was followed by the Police Reform Act of 2002, which, among other policing changes, replaced the Police Complaints Authority with a completely independent investigatory body. The Independent Police Complaints Commission became operational in 2004 and replaced the Police Complaints Authority. It had greater powers and its own team of investigators to probe the most serious incidents. The IPCC had doubled in size between 2013 and 2018, and structural changes were needed to better suit a much expanded organisation. In January 2018, the IPCC became the Independent Office for Police Conduct. In 2020, the police complaint system was reformed to make it simpler and more effective. The IOPC received new powers, including the ability to investigate without a referral from a police force. A greater emphasis was placed on taking the learning from complaints to help improve policing practice overall.
So a mind-blowing little video and, of course, music or a throbbing beat in the background to destroy your brain as you watch it. But let's look at some of the people involved in this pernicious so-called independent organisation. The person I'll focus in on is Rachel Watson, who was appointed Director General of the organisation in April 2024. Independent, Ben, if we have a look at what they say about themselves, that Rachel has significant public service experience, having worked in the heart of government for more than 20 years. This includes a decade working at the Home Office, where she was policing director for 5 years. So somebody who has been part of the system that has failed is then brought forward to so-called the police in their failings to date. This can't be accidental. Now, in the UK column event on Saturday, when we were talking about the deep state and indeed the failings of the deep state, one of the points that I made to the audience was effectively that our security services keep telling us they're listening to us to keep us safe. But if we start to look at the agencies themselves and what their key people do, we learn something rather different. So this is from the Secret Intelligence Service website, where they're talking about Sir Richard Moore, the 17th so-called C. What he has to say is that he's there to help preserve the rules-based international system. So they didn't know anything about the widespread abuse of children, including in Elm Guest House, where personnel from MI5 were reported at the time as being present. They simply didn't know any of this was going on. Now, at the time, UK column reported heavily on what was going on with Elm Guest House, including Cyril Smith, high-ranking police, a leading tycoon, a National Front member, Sinn Féin, royal household official, an MI5 officer, pop stars, and originally some of the former spies in this country. And the other thing we pointed out is that people warning about this abuse were ultimately threatened by special branch. So I'm going to say this is a big thing in the background and it is coming to the surface. But of course, the other thing the column reported on was the cover-up of this abuse by David Cameron's Conservative government. One of the things to note in this very busy diagram is NSPCC, and that links back into the front page of the Mail report, and that Labour MP. Read the article to understand why. But also, of course, what we're seeing here is the abuse of young children in Dolphin Square, where there was also a massive cover-up. But apparently, the Metropolitan Police and our security services don't know anything about it. Now, just to end the segment by a little bit of focus back on the failure of the established media, if we have a look at just one of the internal pages from that Sunday Mail, it is complete comic. We've got a mixture of a lovey story about the king. We've got crass politics being mixed with cheap films. We've got Elton John and loose women. And we've got a headline about a nervous British company called Land Rover. But of course, you have to read the article to understand it's not British, it's Indian. And of course, this is where it takes everybody, is a double-page spread where we are accused of having the problems, the mental health problems, because of things we've done wrong, when in fact what the Daily Mail is doing by printing this dross, in my opinion, is absolutely attacking people's minds. Now, Diane, welcome to today's news. And one of the things that we'd like to stress to our audience is that aside from the videos that go out, the news programs and the interviews, there's a huge amount of information in the articles. And today you wanted to draw people's attention to some of those articles. Welcome.
Yes. Hello, Brian. Hello, Ben. It's good to be here today, even though I'm still quite tired from the weekend. The first thing that I want to point out is a section on sexualization and indoctrination of children. And I'll be going through some other articles and some other reporting that we've been doing in our written articles later in the news. But as the sort of the new editor for written material on the UK Column website, I do want to say that there's quite a bit out there going back years and years, well before we were even producing videos and interviews. So what I wanted to say, first of all, is that there has been several pieces of, I guess you could say, several parts of this whole story of sexualization of children, which I've been covering for some time and will continue to do so until it goes away. And one of these that we've put out most recently has included, for example, articles from Martin Edwards on what he calls education subjugation, particularly focusing on Wales, and Hugh McCarthy in Northern Ireland. Now, of course, these all line up together because they are all following the same globalist policy, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. Hugh's three-part series is called What They Didn't Want to Hear, the Continued Sexualization of Our Children. Part one of the series considered the wider issues affecting education. What is education for exactly? And what we're seeing more and more in the schools is that they're going away from teaching subjects such as geography, maths, reading, and going into social emotional learning, sexualization of children, like I said, and all about feelings, all about relationships, all about these things that are not the things that we would think children should be learning, and how to do things and how to learn things and how to think. So that was part one. Part two considered the promotion of gender ideology. And in this one, he went specifically into globalist policies, particularly from the World Health Organization. And so we're seeing from the WHO that they're telling us what children around the world must be taught. And just to quote a little bit from the article, which quotes directly from the policy, is that their approach to sexuality and children is summed up by this statement, which is in the policy documents. A child is understood to be a sexual being from the beginning. The guidance that's given for children ages 6 to 9 recommends a curriculum content which includes sexual intercourse, gender orientation, sexual behavior of young people, enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's body, including masturbation and orgasm. For ages 9 to 12, the content includes, again, pleasure, masturbation, orgasm, how to enjoy sexuality in an appropriate way, their first sexual experience, so for ages 9 to 12. Part 3 summarizes parental rights, and in Northern Ireland in particular, they're a bit fortunate because it's in their law within their developed nation that parents have the right to say what does not go into the curriculum. We don't have that right explicitly in the other 3 developed nations in the UK. And he asked a question in this article that parents frequently ask, which is, how did we get to this point in the first place? And I would argue that it goes back to, again, that right now the globalist policy that they're saying all over the world we should be doing this. To think about, I want to go a little bit deeper into what he covered in part 3, which is kind of the background to what we call gender affirming care, or as some people I've seen say even more directly, genital affirming care rather than gender. And if we go back to a professor called Tiala, she is an adolescent psychiatrist at Tampere University in Finland. And she talked about how she went back on her previous work where she came up with, was part of the group that came across this protocol, which is called the Dutch Protocol for Gender Affirming Care for Young People. So what she said in just a couple of years ago, she said that she knows now gender affirming care is dangerous. I know because I helped pioneer it. My country and others found that there's no solid evidence supporting the medical transitioning of young people. And this, of course, goes along with the CAS review in the UK, which came directly as a commissioned report from the NHS in England. And a lot of people are still saying it's transphobic and so on. But what's happening is that what Hugh points out is that the previous work is now dated, that it's based on research that is out of date, it's flawed, has problems, and countries around the world and clinicians and so on, and the parents who are letting their children mutilate their bodies before they even turn 16 or 18 years old is based on research that is no longer in date. It goes back to, for example, the 2011 paper, which was in the Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Clinics of North America Journal. And this goes into this Dutch protocol saying that in the Netherlands, gender dysphoric adolescents may be eligible for puberty suppression at age 12, hormone treatment at age 16, cross-sex hormone treatment, and gender reassignment surgery at 18. And it goes through the various steps from the psychological interventions all the way up to the medical mutilation, do you want to say that, of children's bodies, and how these steps go through. And that was back in 2011. But now in April 2024, I went back and found in the Journal of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry that they have said that the European Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Association, this society says now that they are calling for healthcare providers not to promote experimental and unnecessarily invasive treatments with unproven psychosocial effects, and therefore to adhere to the first do no harm principle. Finally, this organization insists that respect for all kinds of different views and attitudes is an essential part of an ongoing open professional debate that we wish to stimulate. So we're seeing again that even though the globalist policy says, well, that this Dutch protocol from 2011 is what we were looking at, but now in 2024 and even more recently, this is continuing to be the case, that people are saying this is not what we should be doing because we don't know the harm that we are doing to young people, which of course we are. And just a little bit more on efforts toward indoctrination. The Scottish Union for Education, which people will know, I'm a member of the editorial board for that, where we're doing work against education, not indoctrination, which is the theme and the logo sort of that we follow in SUE. Kate Deeming, who is the coordinator of the parents group, she wrote an article about the Brothel collection, which is a museum based in Glasgow, and she visited it and talked about some of the LGBT indoctrination and so on that is present currently in the artifacts and the description of the artifacts. And there's a whole report about this that you can read. The link to this will be in the show notes. And 2 examples that she used in her article, for example, was the figure of Guan Yin. And that description says, quote, Guan Yin has always represented the basic human values of compassion and kindness. Trans people deserve respect and understanding. Trans rights are human rights. Be more Guan Yin. And the other one was a dish showing the martyrdom of St. Sebastian from 1500 to 1600. Quote, initially a religious figure, St. Sebastian came to be seen as a gay icon. As LGBT age, I don't know what that is, members, we've looked at why this might be. The arrows fired into his body are like words that can still prick us as LGBTQI plus individuals. In art and film, St. Sebastian is often shown as a beautiful young man appealing to gay culture. LGBTQI plus experiences are very diverse. Who is your icon? And as a result of a conversation that I had over the weekend with a UK column member down in Cheltenham, I was reminded, and actually learned for the first time, I guess I should say, because it's been years since I've read Brave New World, and I didn't remember this. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley was originally published in 1932, written in 1931. And there's a portion of this book in the first few pages. There's a conversation between some children. In the book, it was between the director of hatcheries and conditioning and some children. And the director said, "What I'm going to tell you now," he said, "may sound incredible. But then when you're not accustomed to history, most facts about the past do sound incredible." He let out the amazing truth. For a very long period of before the time of our Ford, and even for some generations afterwards, erotic play between children had been regarded as abnormal. There was a roar of laughter. And not only abnormal, actually immoral. No, and had therefore been rigorously suppressed. A look of astonished incredulity appeared on the faces of his listeners. Poor little kids not allowed to amuse themselves? They could not believe it. Even adolescents, the DHC was saying, even adolescents like yourselves. Not possible. Barring a little surreptitious autoerotism and homosexuality, absolutely nothing. Nothing? In most cases, till they were over 20 years old. 20 years old, echoed the students in a chorus of loud disbelief. 20, the director repeated. I told you that you'd find it incredible. But what happened, they asked. What were the results? The results were terrible. So back in 1931, Aldous Huxley was writing that it would be terrible for people to wait until they were 20 years old or so to start engaging in sexual activity. And I guess that's kind of what we're seeing playing out now. But when we trace back the history, we see that this is not a new agenda. And I want to suggest that perhaps this is something that they've been thinking about for a long time, Brian.
Diane, thank you very much for that. And I think that's a very astute statement that there's lots of clues if we go back in time, but we're in the age we are and we have to fight the battle in the time 2025. At the moment, we have to fight the battle today, but we can only fight that battle if we understand what's actually being done. Let's move on. So, as always, we'd like to thank our audience and everybody that supports us financially through donations as a member. But if you're not sure how to get involved with the UK column, have a look at the webpage, have a look at donations or monthly memberships, annual memberships, or a lifetime subscription. And of course, you can help us by making a purchase through the shop. And we have got health products via Clive de Cole, and we make a small percentage on sales through Clive. Now, the key thing for us is that we're putting out information for people to share, to get the information and the facts out, and you can help us do that. If you pass on the material, please give the UK column a mention. Now, tomorrow, we've got a fantastic interview, which Charles Mallet did with Jonathan Marshall, Thinking with Your Heart. This is essentially about fighting the anti-nature agenda. And that's Tuesday, the 8th of April at 1:00. And I know it's a really interesting interview, and hawks and horses come into it. So there's a lot to this. And if you need a bit of relaxation in understanding what's happening, that is probably one of the interviews to have a look at. Now, we're delighted to be able to say that today we have a little report from our weekend conference, the Deep State, that took place in Cheltenham. It was a fantastic day. We enjoyed it. Everybody who spoke to us said they enjoyed it. And my goodness, some fantastic speakers. Let's have a look at this video report, thanks to Gemma Cooper and the media team that were with us.
From the moment the doors opened, the atmosphere was buzzing. More than 300 people had travelled to Cheltenham to hear UK Column's take on the Deep State. Some had even travelled as far as Australia and the United States to hear what our speakers had to say. Delegates enjoyed tea, coffee, snacks and socialising before settling into their seats for a day of mind-blowing information. Our speakers didn't disappoint. It was one truth bomb after another. First up was activist and campaigner Raja Mir. He kicked off with an explosive exposé about institutionalised corruption. He got a standing ovation. Raja was followed by UK Column's very own editor and co-founder Brian Gerrish. He revealed information he's never told anyone before until now.
This is sedition. This is treason. We were told. What were the security services doing? Where were they? I think they were complicit.
With the deep state firmly in focus, delegates were treated to their very own UK column donut in the break, a nod to the odd-shaped building just up the road, which houses the British Security and Intelligence Agency, GCHQ. Were they listening in today? What do you think? The breaks also gave an opportunity to buy books and merchandise from specially invited guests, and perhaps most importantly of all, the chance to talk to fellow audience members and forge new friendships. But soon it was back to the action, with Alex Thompson talking about his time at GCHQ and giving his insights about the British establishment. Then lunch, a chance to chew over the morning's content and reflect.
What do you think of the event so far today?
I'm really enjoying it, yeah, very insightful, particularly Raja this morning. Really enjoyed that. Quite harrowing actually, and I say enjoy, it's not quite enjoy, but you know what I mean. I think it's been exceptionally well organised. Look forward to the next one.
Wonderful day, sun is shining and everyone chatting. And I think, I noticed that at Bristol where we didn't have access to outdoor space. But here, that adds a certain expansiveness to discussion. And how wonderful it is just to be surrounded by people with whom one can turn effortlessly and say a joke or make a reference, and not check yourself, not second guess your interlocutor, that kind of thing. There is a real ease in that, and I think we only discover it when we come here.
Well, we can see the sky, can't we? And there's no chemtrails, which is quite nice. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's worth every penny. Look at the people, it's just a bunch of wonderful misfits of mad uncles and aunts and fathers and whatever else and mothers. And it's just joy. Absolute joy.
After lunch, a UK column panel discussion with questions from the audience. Then a much-anticipated presentation from Patrick Henningsen, a recent return to UK column's Friday afternoon news show after a stint away. He went down a storm. The final speaker of the day was GCHQ whistleblower Catherine Gunn. She too had the audience on their feet. It was an extraordinary presentation, rounding off an extraordinary day. But it wasn't over yet. Ticket holders joined the UK column team and our speakers for an evening buffet, social and some music. A chance to relax with like-minded people.
These sorts of events are massively important to bring people together. For me, that's what it's all about, is finding people. And it's been lovely today. Really enjoyed it.
The unanimity you get when people get together, which you can't get on a screen, is just so important. And it's what I think most of the big dogs fear, because when we're together and working together and thinking together, we're much more dangerous than if we're behind screens and just a number of followers behind somebody who's bringing across a message. So it's hugely important.
It's spiritually good for us all, I think. And it makes you think that you're not alone, and that maybe that we can fight some of this madness that's thrown at us if we all stick together. The presenters and the interviewees, the interviewers, they all do a fantastic job. And you can just talk to them like they're your friends and always have been your friends at an event like this.
The team themselves, I'm so impressed with their big hearts, actually. You can feel the authenticity, the love and the respect that they have for each other, the care for humanity and what's going on in the world, and their pursuit of the truth. I'm always blown away by the sort of phenomenal research that they all do, their knowledge. It's really quite extraordinary, and I think they're in a league of their own.
The raw honesty and clarity that they provide, I think, is priceless. If only all media was like that, maybe we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in.
UK column saved my life, and B, it's important because of the camaraderie here. The number of people that have come up and said hello, that have, we've always spoken to in chat for a long time. To actually meet them and to share your whole origin story and your experiences and the information that UKC gives us, it just takes it to a different level. And you can't get that on chat, and you can't get that through a screen. You've got to be here, folks, to experience it.
The event was so successful, plans are now underway for the next UK column on location in the autumn, and a residential weekend next year. Gemma Cooper for UK column in in Cheltenham.
Well, there we are. A wonderful event, and of course, more planned. So if you didn't come to that one, stay with us because you'll have the opportunity in the future. Now, I'd also say that if you didn't see Saturday's event, you weren't there, that's still available as a live stream, which you can get through the UK Column website. That's £20 for non-members, £18 for UK Column members. But the next best thing to have a look at that live event. Now, Diane, let's bring you back with us because you've got more to say about material that's been up on the UK Column and the good work of our authors of the written reports.
Yes, thanks, Brian. That was a wonderful video. I'm kind of overwhelmed by all the compliments that we just received in that video. I've just seen it for the first time. That was amazing. But I also want to make sure that, again, because I'm working with so many wonderful authors that have giving us a lot of written content for our website as well, to make sure that all of these are highlighted, and also because I have some additional information to add for another article that was published recently, because it's a real pleasure for me as the editor to be working with our authors when they're topics that I know about and can maybe make suggestions, although, of course, we're a completely free speech platform when it comes to their work. But I do want to mention just as well, since I've taken over in February, that we have published several written articles that you can find if you search the UK Column website, and we'll provide some links as well in the show notes. And these range all the way from replacement migration, written by Simon Elmer, which is actually a republication of part of his own book that he published before this was in the UK Column website. We have an article from Mark Anderson about Guernsey, the tiny island that beat the big bankers for 20 years of monetary freedom. We have articles from Charles Mallet, including Farmers' Protests the Wrong Target as an earlier one. Another article called COVID Vaccines and New Mechanisms of Serious Pathology by Dr. Mike Williams. An article about Mark Carney, who's the new technocratic globalist Prime Minister of Canada. Post-Democracy in Germany, about the constitutional crisis happening in Germany. That's by Jobst Landgräbe. We have another article with Charles called The Church of England in the Room with Big Tech. And the one that is just from a couple of days ago, The Evolution of the Serial Chemical Weapons Narrative and the Road to Gauta. That's part 2 of a chemical weapons, a narrative series by Dr. Piers Robinson. And finally, the one that I want to focus on is one by Martin Edwards called The Great Transition and NGO Alliances, Charting a Course Towards the Rocks of Net Zero. And the reason I want to talk about this one is because there is a lot of information in this article, but there is also some information that I want to provide that kind of contextualizes what he's done with it and where it can potentially go the further you dig deeper. And this is what I think we're so good at UK Column, not just me, obviously, but all of us, that we go deeper than the typical media, and even articles and videos that sometimes viewers send to us from other non-mainstream sources, even if they are alternative or independent sources. I would have to say that a lot of them I personally wouldn't use in my own reporting because they don't go that far into the depths that we go into to kind of figure out where things actually come from, and to look at the original sources as well. So actually looking at policy documents, and we are able to stay away from all of the sensationalism and all of the, oh, look at this is really scary and exciting, because we're going to actual sources and no one can dispute us, even if they try to. So in this article by Martin Edwards, he talks about the Planetary Health Alliance as an organization, which is, quote, a consortium of over 480 universities, non-governmental organizations, research institutes, and government entities from 80 plus countries around the world. And I'm just going to read a couple of bits from this article so that you can see where I'm going to with this. Its origins can be traced to 2015, when the Rockefeller Foundation and Lancet Commission, which is the Lancet, which is a medical journal working with the Rockefeller Foundation on planetary health, published a report called Safeguarding Human Health in the Anthropocene Epoch in the Lancet Journal. It defines Anthropocene, if you don't know this word already. If you do know it, that's great. If you don't, you need to catch up on your globalist terminology. It is a proposed name for a new geological epoch demarcated as the time when human activities began to have a substantial global effect on the Earth's systems. In the executive summary of this report, the authors talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, and they say that reasons for hope include the advent of the SDGs and the post-2015 development agenda, which provide an important opportunity to address these trends and to tackle health, social, environmental challenges in integrated ways. the part that's really interesting and what really got me going as not just an editor, but as a reporter, it discusses 4 alternative scenarios of future development that exemplify alternative worlds that might emerge from the present. The first 2 scenarios represent an evolution of conventional worldviews. For example, market forces exemplifies market-centered growth or oriented globalization, whereas policy reform tells of a government-led redirection of growth towards sustainability goals. It says that the alternative scenarios presented in the report envisioned a fundamental restructuring of the global order, authoritarianism and fragmentation in fortress world, and positive transformation in the Great Transition, in which material consumption is reduced but is more equitable than the present. And another report, which is shorter, that talks about this Great Transition scenario, the future scenario of the Great Transition, can be found in a report from October 2021 from the Planetary Health Meeting. They met in Sao Paulo, and while the rest of us were locked up under COVID restrictions, they decided to go to Sao Paulo and talk about the planet. And they said at that time, they called this fundamental shift in how we live on Earth the Great Transition. Achieving this will require rapid and deep structural changes across most dimensions of human activity, including how we produce and consume food, energy, manufactured goods, how we construct and live in our cities, and how we consider and measure growth, progress, and development, and govern ourselves. It will take practitioners, scholars, and policymakers across every dimension of human activity working together. Now, the reason that was interesting was because they concluded their report talking about how else it's going to help us achieve the Great Transition. And when I saw that, I remembered a report that I did back in September 2024 about the United Nations Summit of the Future. And working backwards from the Summit of the Future, which happened last year or in the last several months, I went back to a globalist, a little known globalist, but a very influential one called Dr. Paul Raskin from Yale University. And he was actually a member of the Club of Rome in the past, and we just found that out recently. I want to go back and play a couple of clips to show where this came from, because the reports that were highlighted in Martin's report didn't really mention Paul Raskin, but he's the one, and his organization called the Tellus Institute was the one that did this. So my question is, are the globalists plagiarizing each other, essentially? But let's play my clip that I showed back in September on the news first, please.
When we discuss scenarios, we talk about 3 broad channels radiating out into the future. One we call conventional worlds, basically an evolutionary sequence of events despite hiccups like the current meltdown, that the basic paradigm and values persist into the future. The second channel is barbarization, in which markets and policies are unable to cope with the crises, and the chaos and social disruption and the environmental deterioration that is induced by conventional worlds. And you have futures of catastrophic disruption. And the third we call great transitions, where people rise to the possibilities, to the promise of this planetary phase with new values and new institutions, and development steers towards a more fortunate form of civilization.
So he wrote a book or the Tellus Institute, I guess, really wrote a book that was published in 2016 called Journey to Earthland, in which he further sort of develops these ideas about the Great Transition. And what he says is that global consciousness, cultural experimentation, popular struggles for peace, justice, and sustainability urge a great transition. Which tendency will dominate? So we have these different scenarios that we can choose from. And he said that the Great Transition, after a period of gestation, could rapidly unfold in a whirlwind of change. As dominant norms lose their sway and system elements and structures begin to crack, the revolutionary moment will have survived. If well prepared, oppositional and visionary movements can influence the anatomy of the kind of earthland that emerges from the tumult. So let's play this next clip, which is from the same original video, which I haven't played on the news previously, which shows exactly what kind of earth Dr. Raskin envisions for us.
Because humanity has found a way to balance the imperatives of global responsibility with diversity and pluralism in modes of culture and development. When we take our trips to outer space and we look back, we see an integral blue planet. We don't see imaginary lines of states. And so that this globalism, this sense of the earth as a natural unit for a human organization and identity is some ways more profound than are the imaginary boundaries of nation state.
So he says in this book as well, going on, that the choices we make, the actions we take now before catastrophes erupt, old institutions crumble and new ones solidify, are decisive for keeping progressive options open. This news may be disheartening, comforting, or inspiring, but cannot be ignored for that too would be a choice. So, Brian, I just want to say that, what we're hearing here and what we can see in these reports is that Paul's actually talking about what the globalists want us to do, what to do with this agenda. We talk about this constantly on the news, which is their ultimate goal, which is to destroy the nation state and have Earth be a big sort of blue and green blob of existence. We've talked about this frequently, and UKCOM will continue to do so. But my point here is that if people want to go deeper into what we report on, a lot of this will be available in the written articles, which we simply just don't have time to do when we publish videos and news broadcasts for 3 hours a week. But if you want more depth, you can always go into this amazing archive that we have of written reports.
Diane, thank you very much for that. An excellent point. Huge amount of material on the UK Column website, and we use it ourselves as an archive very often when we are reporting today. We go and look at what we were saying 10, 15 years ago. Ben, just to end off today's news, everything is about utopia in the future, Mission 2025.
Indeed, utopia in the future, the grand transition, the just and sustainable transition from one economic model to a new one, the political process that will facilitate it, exactly as described there by Diane. Thank you for that report. But I think they might be in trouble. And let's start off by looking at what they're up to with Mission 2025.
The UN climate conference COP29 is taking place this week in Azerbaijan. It's a chance for international cooperation and to bridge the gap between world leaders and the private sector. I've been around London to hear from British businesses and experts to get their views on how we can work together towards a just, clean and prosperous transition.
The good news is we are a global economy in a state of transition.
There's a huge appetite for investment in the next industrial revolution.
Businesses are absolutely at the arrowhead. They are the innovators. They're going to make the change happen, and they need support from the ecosystem.
When it comes to climate change, adaptation and resilience, institutional asset owners are really keen to play their part.
Businesses understand the barriers, and so listening seriously to them will allow policymakers to steer towards a net zero future.
Most businesses are ready to run, but now they need governments to create supportive policy landscapes to help them act decisively.
Climate change is still the world's biggest market failure. It runs the risk of destabilising the international geopolitical world order as well as financial markets.
We're already going in the right direction, but now it's a question of how we move at the pace and scale required. Wind and solar are rising to new highs. Industrial transformation is picking up pace. Restoring nature and transforming our food systems is both possible and increasingly profitable. Leaders are stepping up and speaking up. But we still need to move faster and leave no one behind.
Lovely music.
Always.
Mind-numbing.
But it's money and power. Power and money. Money, they're super keen to invest in the next industrial revolution. This is a multi-trillion global marketplace. The City of London's lined up behind it, and they want power, the policymakers, to enable this program. That's what's happening internationally. And as I said, I think they're in trouble. I'll come on to that in a minute. The first thing is to note who's actually leading this. So this lady in the centre there, that's Christiana Figueres. She is involved in something called Global Optimism, and she's one of the main voices in the climate movement, involved with the World Bank and the UN, and recently was at the Palace, which we can see here, to receive a DBE. She's a dame now, right? So she's, as ever, linked very closely into the British establishment. You can get a bit more background on her, and I recommend that you do by going to look at this article people. So this is who exactly is Christiana Figueres. This is on the Winter Oak website. We'll provide a link to it. And she's leading this out on behalf of these people, right? This is the partner list on the Mission 25 website. And we can see in here some familiar names. We've got C40 Cities, so we've got Sadiq Khan in there. We've got the Bezos Earth Fund. We've got E3G based in London, which is like the global hub of all the new blueprints for the transition and new economy they want us to move towards. IKEA, a bunch of corporate money. And we can see Planetary Guardians, that's Paul Pullman and the B Team. And then the Club of Rome pop up, right? So this is exactly what Paul Raskin was just talking about earlier. And this is the actual mechanics of how this marketplace is delivering this transition. It's how they're driving this thing forward.
And this is the partnership that you're constantly talking about, Ben. And I'll just say, caught my eye at the bottom of the screen as it was scrolling up there, but you've got Unilever next to the University of Exeter. Now, obviously, that's just a coincidence that they're there, but universities next to global big business, nothing to worry about, apparently.
No, absolutely not. And Systemic also, who are in the mix. Now, they issued, that film was put out at COP back in November. They just issued this back in January. This is the Global Mutirão. Mutirão is a Brazilian term, which is a community coming together to work on a shared task. And this is just a really neat piece of communication that I think sums up what they're doing, but also where they're at. And there's some hope in here for me. So they're saying that the darkest hour comes before dawn. A new economy is rising, but we are at the center of this new economy. Our needs, aspirations, and potential. When they say we, they mean them. Yeah, it's not us. This is the partner list that we just looked at. If you read what these people put out, every now and again, they betray exactly what they're up to. We're at the center of this new economy. That's what they're saying, yeah? And the power structure that's going to enable it. What do they need to deliver? They've got to accelerate our energy and industrial revolution, protect our abundant natural world, ensure our futures are financed. So all of this is about money. They're obsessed with this thing called climate finance. And importantly, this final slide, this is what gives me hope, how we must respond. We got to end infighting. Yeah, this is like an internal communication thing that they've put out. I don't know if they expect other people to read this stuff, right? But apparently they need to stop attacking allies and embrace different paths towards a shared vision. They all hate each other. Yeah, this is corporate politics. You've got people who've come up through the system by being ruthless and taking other people out, and now they're turning on each other. Right? I think that they're struggling to implement their plans. It says upgrade our tactics. We've got to stop broadcasting and start building a movement. So this is less about media, more about on the ground. Tailor our message, stop ignoring the audience and focus on what truly matters to people. And unfortunately, what matters to people has got nothing to do with the economic, technological and political transition that they're trying to force us into. Yeah.
Right. That's it, Ben. I think we need to stop there for today's news. We're always short of time because there is so much happening, but each UK column news, we try and get out as much as we possibly can to the audience. So let's end it there. Huge thank you to everybody who's joined us today, wherever you are in the world. We're very grateful of your support, and the more viewers we get, the stronger UK column becomes. Now, I just want to point out that Saturday's event was wonderful. We're going to look to have another one in the autumn, and next year is our 20th anniversary as UK Column News, and we're going to look to have a special weekend event, so stay with us for all of that. And my last comment is, yes, we did invite the director of GCHQ to come and enjoy the day on her doorstep, but unfortunately she was much too busy to attend and actually discuss her work with the wider public. A great shame. Let's leave it there. For members of the UK Column, stay with us because we'll have UK Column Extra in just a few minutes. Bye-bye.